Welcome back to another episode of The Hip. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. On this week's episode of The Hip, I was delighted to be joined by Clare Budden, Chief Executive of ClwydAlyn. ClwydAlyn are a North Wales housing association with about 6,500 properties. And we talked about Clare's journey, how she chose housing as a career choice, and how her transition into this role has come about. We also talk about how important social value is to Clare, but also to the organisation, and how they offer lots of support to those vulnerable people across North Wales. We also talk a lot around their people and culture, and how in the 5 or 6 years Clare's been there, she's transformed the organisation to what it is today, how they've kept their culture strong, how they've made sure they embrace the values of the organisation, and some tips and advice for other businesses that want to improve their culture and their values. We also talk about the future and some exciting things and roles that ClwydAlyn will be recruiting in the near future. I hope you like this episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Clare, welcome to the podcast.
Good to have the conversation today, James.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And as we always like to start, do you mind just by giving us an introduction to yourself for the listeners?
So my full name's Clare Budden. I'm from North Wales, lived here most of my life, but not all of my life. Got 4 children. And my current job is that I'm the Group Chief Exec at ClwydAlyn Housing Association. And I still every day pinch myself that I've got the job. I'm so proud to be doing it. And I just feel so privileged and really, really lucky. I'm also a board member of the Health Board in North Wales, which I've joined recently while the health service has been in its worst position possible in North Wales. It was taken back into special measures by the Welsh Government a year ago. But I feel that as a landlord providing homes for 15,000 people across the region, and also as somebody who lives here, my family live here, if I can do something to help to improve the health services and to improve and address health inequality, then it's something that I should do. So that's kind of what I do. In terms of my background, working class girl, the eldest of 5, my brothers and sisters would tell you, really bossy as a child. Maybe that's one of the kind of signs of somebody who's going to become a boss in the future. My dad worked at Vauxhall's and my mum was a housewife. I did go to university, but I was the first person in my family ever to go. And a lot of people say that, don't they? But I kind of went there by a bit of a weird route, really. So I ended up doing a degree in cookery and social policy. And that period in my life, those 3 years, fundamentally changed me and opened my eyes, and I think was the biggest thing that's impacted how I've worked for the rest of, for all of my career. So why? So when I went to university, I started to read lots of books around social policy. So I read a lot about the criminal justice system, about sexism, racism, apartheid, and it was things I didn't know much about at all until I went there. And then secondly, alongside that, one evening I was taken to Menwith Hill, and people my age will know what I mean by that. But for those younger people like you, James, Menwith Hill is an RAF base in Yorkshire near Harrogate. And American service people have been based there for a long time. And it's known as being a spying station, but basically it's a huge communications network in place. And at the time of Green and Common in the 80s, when women were protesting about nuclear disarmament or campaigning for it, there were a group of women who moved outside that camp because they were concerned during the Cold War period that the UK was putting its people at risk by hosting American service people who were using the communications network there. So why was that profound to me? So I went and met women there who had given up their life, had given up their homes, had given up their jobs. Some had gone to prison and they were living in tents. There's no running water, no electricity. Some of them had their children with them. Some have had to leave their children behind because of something they believed in. And it had a profound impact on me in terms of encouraging me to be brave, encouraging me to do the things I believe in, to stand up for them, and not to be turned away by difficulty, not to think things are too hard. I couldn't believe that people would do something like that because of something that they believed in. So that was probably has been the most momentous thing that happened to me. On a funnier note, which I've never found funny at the time, we filmed them, we filmed ourselves interviewing them, and it was the old days of big videotapes.
Yep.
And I was at home with my parents, pride of place. And one night my brother recorded Match of the Day on it because he couldn't find another tape. So haven't even got it anymore.
Oh no, bet he was popular in the household that day.
Absolutely. So those two things, reading, seeing things for myself in terms of what people are prepared to do. And then I also did a placement as a student in the homeless service in Chester Council. So I think those three things made me decide I wanted a career in housing. So I didn't fall into it like lots of people do. I chose it, and I've never regretted it. So I've got many, many years experience in local government. I've worked for 3 different councils across Wales and England, northwest of England, and I've worked for 3 different housing associations. And I started out as a trainee, so I've done every job from, you name it. I've done that job along the journey. I don't know why. Somebody saw something in me. I was mentored and coached, and I was a manager by the time I was 25, stepping into a space, and that was only in the early 90s where, all the bosses were pretty much men at that time. Things are so different now. And I was probably, everybody I was a manager for was older than me. But great learning experience. And I'd say to everybody, housing is such a great career. The days are never the same. The work varies every single day. You never know what's gonna happen, but it's just interesting work, and you just feel that you're doing something useful.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I'd never change the sector I work in now. But and it's lovely to hear someone that's not fallen into it, because honestly, I'd say 90% of the people I speak to have fallen into it in one way or another.
Yeah.
But I mean, firstly, the Clwyd-Alyn role, talk to me. I mean, it's really obvious this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. But why did you take it on? It must have been a proud moment to work for a housing association close to home, firstly. But what was the reason that attracted you to it, and what has been the journey since you joined the business?
So I'd, when you think about your career, I had applied for a few chief executive jobs over my career, not got them. I was never somebody that I thought had the charisma or the kind of standing to perhaps for recruitment people to see me in that role. So I was in a really senior job at Flintshire Council. I was responsible for a broad range of services and this is at the time of austerity in the late sort of 2018, 2019 time period, where councils had to strip out a lot of costs. So I went there as the head of housing, but I ended up doing housing, regeneration, economic development, council tax, housing benefit, registering births and deaths, customer services for the whole council. So the portfolio was huge. It was my home local authority, so it was the place where I grew up. So I loved it. I did love it. And then I saw that in fact, the chief exec of Clwyd-Alyn was retiring, and he told me, because in my day job, we worked really closely with the association. So I knew the association quite well. I knew they did lots of homeless services. I knew that they had a long and sort of proud history in the region, 40 years old, actually, that year I joined. And I sort of thought to myself, I was probably going to stay at Flintshire now, probably for the rest of my career. And I thought, do I go for it? Is now the right time for me? And I think now, looking back, it was the right time. And I was probably ready for the job. And maybe in the past, when I'd been applying for things, maybe I wasn't quite ready. But what attracted me to the organisation was that it operated across the whole of North Wales, and it provided services that meet different needs that people have at different stages in their lives. But it also provided a lot of services and accommodation for the most vulnerable people. And that probably, if you think back to the things that really impacted me when I was in my sort of late teens, early 20s, I guess it felt like there was a good fit. So I applied for the job, and amazingly, how fantastically I got the job. So I think you'd asked me what it was like when I joined.
Yeah.
So the previous chief exec had been here over 20 years. He'd grown the association a lot during that time. And he'd just been to the bond market. So it was the first housing association in Wales who'd got private finance through a public bond. So we had a lot of money to be able to build a lot of homes for people across the region. So that was a really, if you want to enter an organisation where you don't need to worry about the finances, that was fantastic. However, and I suppose there's a balance between anybody who wants to put their mark on something, wants to shape it in their own way, don't they? But what I would
Of
say is
course.
that the association was quite old-fashioned in its approach, quite processy, a lot of rules. People followed the rules. Yes, the company got things done, but it was in a way that I found, or I would have found in my earlier career, a little bit frustrating in terms
Yeah.
of, here in the offices here, there were locks on doors. It was, the boardroom had a big old-fashioned wooden table and huge chairs, and there was very much a kind of head office culture where people who worked in a lot of our 24/7 services out in the community where it really matters would feel intimidated coming into the offices. They didn't feel comfortable being here. So it felt to me that the organisation needed to almost refocus itself, gain a whole new energy around things, bring some fun into work, develop, a culture where people felt trusted to do their work, were recognised for their competency. And I think perhaps the most important thing, I would say to you that it saw itself before as a housing business that managed homes and employed people to do that. I would say to you, and I would say all housing associations fundamentally, we're people businesses that also provide homes for people to live in, because people's needs are different, people's wants for their lives are different, people's aspirations for their lives are different. And if we're going to have a really thriving organisation that's great for our residents and great to work in, then I think we have to focus firstly on people. And if we get all of that right, then we will deliver amazing homes for people and great services for them too. Amazing. So that's a big focus for the changes we've made here.
Yeah, and I suppose just give us a little bit of a helicopter overview. So what did you inherit, size, scale, operationally, and then what are we looking at today as ClwydAlyn? What's the business today?
Okay, so we've been here 6 years in April. So when I joined, we owned 5,600 homes. We're now at 6,500. We had a turnover of around £40 million a year. It's now going to be £64 million from this year. And we employed around about 750 staff, and we've got about 800 staff now. So they're the kind of
phenomenal
metrics. Our staff turnover and our staff satisfaction, they're all things that have improved in my time here. So tenant satisfaction, out of 126 landlords, where it all gets measured independently across the UK, and these are the latest results right now, we're 8th in the UK for overall satisfaction. And we're a tiny player compared to many of the social landlords. And our scores are kind of 15% above the average. So clearly something we're doing is having a positive impact on how our tenants feel. We've done a recent staff survey, and 60% of staff responded. And we had an interesting conversation at the board where one of the board members said, only 60%. What could we do, Claire, to get more people to respond next time? And then other people around the room who work in HR and people type services were saying 60% of staff's amazing.
Nice.
And out of that, 91% said they'd recommend us as an employer. 80% said they trust us. And I guess some important things in today's world, 88% of staff said that they were confident that if they had any mental health issues and they asked their manager to support them, that they'd get positive response.
Amazing.
So
how have you done that, Claire? Because, I know you a little bit better, obviously, but for the listeners, what are some of the things that you had to do to make employees, firstly, but it will also link into customers, but trust the process, be able to be open, be able to be transparent, because locks on doors, wood tables, it's not uncommon, that story, in terms of the housing associations of old. But you've obviously done quite a lot in 6 years. So what do you think the key success has been?
So if I think about staff first, and I guess there's what I'd call hard and soft levers, or hard and soft things that we've done. So on the hard side, when I joined, we had 3 different sets of terms and conditions for staff. And as you'd imagine, the more senior you were, the better they were.
Yeah.
And if you worked in our trades team, you had what they called market terms and conditions, which meant statutory minimum holidays and sick pay. So we did a whole review of terms and conditions, and we've now got one consistent set for the whole business. So I have the same terms and conditions as every other member of staff in the company.
Love that.
So I think that sent out a big message to people about how we value everybody. And some of that cost the organisation money, and for some people it meant their T's and C's are not quite as generous now as they were in the past, but it was about the interest of the whole business. So we also, at the time I joined, there were too many, in my view, some organisations might still have said the numbers weren't huge, but too many disciplinaries, grievances, capability type processes underway. And my experience is that I've hardly ever seen anything good come out of any of those processes. And yet what they're supposed to do, aren't they, is to help support improvement in the organisation, to make sure things are done in the right way, or to provide opportunities to train and develop people. But they nearly always, always leave people with some bad feelings. So we said that we would stop doing those things. Now, just saying some of those things doesn't change trust or how people believe. So we dealt with some old legacy issues, and we were determined to move forward. And when there are challenges in teams or challenges with individuals, or that we would just address those things quickly and positively. So we provided training for our managers around how to have good conversations with people, not to avoid small issues and incidents when they happen, and really to work with each other as adults, so to have adult-to-adult conversations.
Correct.
So we provided a fair bit of support around that. And I guess what's really important is we did a lot of work to develop some fresh values for the organisation. So we've only got 3: trust, kindness and hope. They came from staff, they came from residents. We wanted a really small number, and we wanted simple words that everybody knew what they meant.
Yep.
And then the big challenge around that is we have to live them, and we have to live them every single day, and I have to live them every day. Yep. And one of the things I've learned is, I hate the phrase, but the size of the shadow you cast. If I come into work miserable, if I come into work looking worried, if I don't, live those values, then we can't expect everybody else to. So me, the exec, the board, it's our job to make sure we believe in them, first of all, because I think it's quite hard to live values that aren't true to you.
I agree.
Yeah, so some of the softer stuff we've done is to really embody those values through everything that we do. So we trust our staff to make good decisions. We ask them to treat our tenants as individuals. So if there's something that you need that's different than what I need, then that's absolutely the right thing to do. So we've been on a journey with it. I wouldn't say to you every corner of the organisation really believes in this, and every single person, wakes up in the morning with the ClwydAlyn brand running through their minds, the first thing they think of. But wow, we are a long, long way into this. And I think things like the staff survey results, the feedback we get from people about working for the company. We're refreshing our corporate plan, and I've been to every team meeting over the last year. So it's been a great opportunity to chat to people. And if I give an example, when I used to go and talk to the trade staff in a meeting, then the first thing they'd talk about is pay or holiday, or all the feedback I got this year from them was all about things that we could do that would make it easier for them to do more repairs for tenants, or to do those repairs better. Yeah. Because some of the other past historical issues aren't issues anymore. So
it's amazing. How have you dealt with the comms? So I always think with the values thing, some organisations live and breathe them, and some organisations it's on a piece of paper somewhere and no one understands what they are. But how, from a practical level, do you disseminate or make people believe in the values and communicate them through people? how have you made them stick? Because you have. I've spoken to your team. They all say the same things. So it's obviously working.
Brilliant. That's nice to hear that feedback. So some of it, so we've transformed our communications.
Okay.
So the way we communicate internally with staff and the way we communicate, externally with our residents and with other stakeholders and partners. But that also, you can write words on pieces of paper, can't you, and shout them out on social media, but people have to believe them and see them. So one of the things that we did with staff was to change the way we dealt with issues and problems that people have at work. So in the past, people might have had an expectation that something would become formal. We don't deal with hardly anything formally anymore. We just have conversations with people. People who might have in the past been asked to leave the company. If they're in the wrong role, we'll try and find an alternative role for them. If they need, further training or support to do the job, we'll we encourage and support that too. So we've tried to create a far more open culture, firstly, where you bring your whole true self to work. So you don't have a work persona and
yeah, of course.
I'm somebody else when I'm at home, because how people are as themselves is good enough for us. It's what we want. And we all know where we've tried to be the other person because we think that's what someone wants. Your mask slips after a while anyway, doesn't it? So it's hard to do that. And I guess we're just, fortunately, because we deliver a broad range of services and we have a lot of things we do in-house that other associations subcontract out, we've generally always got an opportunity to find the right role for somebody with the right support. We've done a lot of training for managers around how they support neurodiversity. And when we think somebody might not fit in a team or fit in a role, we don't give up on the person. What we look at is what that person might need to enable them to do the job. So I think it's lots of small things that you do every single day, and they create their own ripples. So you can't tell people, can you? This culture's amazing. They have to feel it and see it for themselves. So we celebrate success. We'll do nothing. We don't do lots of big fancy events, but when people get qualifications, we'll do an afternoon tea and thank them. I'll write personal cards and speak to people when they've done great things. And we have sort of systems like managers are able to give a gift voucher to a member of staff if they've done something amazing. So we don't have a set of rules around it or a process. It's up to managers to recognise good performance where people have gone the extra mile. But at the same token, we expect managers to talk to people when there's a bit of an issue as well.
Yeah, and it sounds to me that like the basic things that you do are brilliant, and actually they add up and, like you say, create a ripple effect. But surely as well, by doing the right thing and staff understanding you're doing the right thing by each individual will create that confidence that you're going to act in the right way, which makes people more open about the way they are with things. So.
Yeah, and we've adopted a similar approach around our services to tenants. So whereas most associations and us in the past, if you don't pay your rent, you get a warning letter. And what we've done is to turn things on its head so that when someone doesn't pay their rent, we contact them and ask them if everything's okay. Yeah. So, of course, we have a conversation about their rent, but the conversation's about, we're presuming that everybody wants to pay their rent in the same way that you and me would want to pay our mortgage or our rent or our electricity bill.
Of course.
There'd be a problem if we... And why is anybody living in our homes any different than me and you? So we take the view that our tenants want to pay their rent, they want to maintain their roof over their head. So if problems arise, what can we do to help them rather than throwing a stick at people? I can remember times in the past when, I was on a really low salary and I had 3 young kids, and I used to dread opening my bank statement or dread opening, and we've all been there, haven't we? And we don't want people to feel like that about us. What we want them to do is, before it gets to a stage of becoming serious, is that they talk to us and we do what we can to help them. So we try to have the same approach with our staff too.
Yeah, and you mentioned something before, which I just want to pick up on because I think this is a big thing, especially in our sector, is how important is your behaviour in the way that your organisation treats customers? Like you talked about the shadow, and I really agree with that. But how important is it for you as a leader to show the right example and show the right behaviours, would you say?
I think it's absolutely crucial,
Yeah, I agree.
absolutely crucial. And I don't think it matters how big your organisation is, and there are some really big social housing businesses in the UK. If I don't love our residents and love working with them and want to get to know them, so we have a really good engagement structure at ClwydAlyn where our residents really influence what we do, and I spend a lot of time talking to tenants and residents. Because those people's rent pay our wages, and they're living in our homes, and they deserve to get really good services from us. So I think you can never underestimate the touch points that you have with staff or with tenants every single day and how much that matters. And sometimes, and I never do things just for show. I do it because I think it's the right thing to do or because I want to do it. But
Yeah.
over Christmas, I went in one of our nursing homes and helped to serve the lunch. And another day I went into a care home and helped to cook the lunch. And so why did I do that? I did that because a lot of our staff work 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
And yet the people at the head office are perceived to be, we're all right, Monday to Friday, we get all the bank holidays off. And also we've got some staffing issues, attracting staff to come and work in our kitchens. And I wanted to really understand what the work involved. And I can talk to our kitchen staff all day, but I didn't realise, and I'd forgotten how hard that work is actually, because we've all worked in pubs and kitchens when we were young, but working in the kitchen from 9 till 3, never sat down, never had a break, on my feet all the time. There was a lovely part serving the lunch, but there was a lot of stuff like peeling hundreds of kilos of carrots and mopping the floor. And actually, unless you see and feel some of that occasionally, I'm not saying every chief exec should be doing all the things I do, but it really helps you to understand some of the challenges that your staff face and helps to build rapport. And also you can have a bit of a chat with the residents while you're there. So maybe it's me and maybe I'm weird, but I think that's important. And it's not just me that does that at ClwydAlyn. So the whole of the exec team get out and about into services. We've got some street homeless services, and our exec director of resources will get out and about with those staff. And we always learn something. We learn things every time that we didn't know about our own business or our own services.
Yeah, and it's obvious with yourself, but passion is such an important part in our sector. And I don't think we lack it. I don't meet many leaders that don't have the passion for the sector because there are easier jobs to do. There are. Yeah. We're in a difficult sector in an adverse time at the moment, but that passion is so important, isn't it? To make sure that people are feeling you care at every step of the way. Staff, tenants, residents, everyone needs to understand that you care.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I think that one of maybe the mistakes that the social housing sector made in probably the 90s, I think, so quite early on in my career, was we started to look to the private sector for how we should run our businesses. So everybody introduced contact centres. We tried to, avoid contact at times, allow people to self-serve. We wanted to get be like the best contact centres, get the calls down to 2 minutes, answer them fast.
Yeah, I agree.
And create some barriers maybe between us and our tenants. But our tenants, because social housing is in such scarce supply, our tenants are the most vulnerable people in the UK, living in the most challenging circumstances. So the kind of service that is very remote from people isn't always going to make it easy for people to keep that roof over their head. So I think some of the private sector practices have been brilliant at making things more efficient. But I think we can't forget who the people are who live in our homes, and we have to be able to get that right balance between, efficiency and technology and the personal interaction and touch with our customers. So all of our housing officers visit every tenant in their patch at least once a year. They're expected to know them all. They've only got patch sizes of around 250 homes each, so they can do that because it's quite a small patch. But that's so that when people have a problem, they don't feel we're remote from them, and they feel, and it doesn't mean we don't hassle those people that don't need us. So,
Yeah, of course.
those people who only want to let us in to do the gas servicing once a year, that's fine, as long as they're doing fine and they don't need us. Of course, we don't harangue people.
No, and look, and I like that, because I think we shouldn't be making efficiencies, especially when technology, it's like this one size fits approach for people. It doesn't work for everyone. And if the efficiencies are working for us and not for the customer and the resident, they shouldn't be happening. It should be making their lives easier, not our lives easier in some ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think because I probably come over as being like wholly touchy-feely, but if I take it back to the basics, every time someone leaves one of our homes because the tenancy's failed, either because they didn't pay the rent, or they've caused a problem with their neighbours, or other stuff's got on top of them in their lives and they've disappeared, it costs us several £1,000s, because we lose rent for a number of weeks, we have to do repairs, we have to find a new tenant, we have to settle them in. So it's actually more cost effective to keep people in their homes if we can anyway. So this isn't just a hearts and minds thing. Actually, it helps to create a more financially strong organisation as well.
No, I agree. And I just wanted to touch on some social value stuff, because, as I've got to know the business over the last few months, a huge part of what you do is giving back. And a huge part of what you do is making sure that you're impacting people's lives as much as possible. But can you talk me where that passion comes from, or where does that fire come from for you as a person, but also for the organisation? Because it's absolutely everything I've read, seen, done has shown that you are just there to try and give support to those vulnerable and people that need your support and help.
So in terms of where's that come from, I suppose I would take it back to when I was a homeless officer.
Okay.
And the numbers of people that you see, what they call repeat homelessness, that you've worked with a person, you've got them settled somewhere, and then a year or so later, they're homeless again. And I think that I just felt that we're failing people, and the implications for people who become homeless is they're not only a cost to housing, whether that's a housing association or whether it's the local authority, there is a huge impact on them personally. And, I saw people who their children had to change school. The parent lost all of their local network who used to help them with childcare, or the children lost their friends. They had to get a new doctor, they had to get a new dentist. And some of those impacts can be life-changing for people. And I think it made me realise that sometimes in hard-pressed public sector organisations, we work within a set of rules and parameters that don't always we don't consider the broader impact. So if you're in a cash-starved local authority, you think about the costs, your direct costs. If you're in health, you think about your direct costs. And I guess I've always had a bit more of a view about the whole system. So it doesn't matter if ClwydAlyn is potentially saving money by maybe evicting somebody. There'll be a cost somewhere else in the public system.
Yeah.
And ultimately, as people who live and work in Britain, that's all of our problem in the end, actually, isn't it? So I think it kind of came from there. And I think, social value is a really popular phrase, isn't it now? It's like the latest thing. And what we've tried to do at ClwydAlyn is to understand what matters to tenants living in our homes. So it hasn't been a focus on an ESG report. We do produce one of those, but one that all the funders like to have on their coffee tables, because I've sat in London at some of the big funders and they have them spread everywhere, don't they?
Of course, yeah.
So they can tell everybody they're investing ethically, which is important, and we need to tick that box. But for us, the social value's been about, well, what really matters to people living in our homes? What are the things they're bothered about? What are the things they're worried about? We know a third of children in Wales grow up in poverty. We know that increasingly poverty is impacting working households more and more. And so it's a direct ask of residents, what are the things you're bothered about, and then what can we do to support and help people with that? So we give freedom to housing officers so they have money that they can spend with whatever they think it needs to be spent on. So it could be paying someone's taxi to get to work for a week because their car's broke down. It could be paying for the car to be fixed, or it could be helping with school shoes, or it could be money for food. we are in partnership with a social enterprise that's focused on addressing food poverty. So we've got lots and lots of different ways to support people around food. And we always want to do everything with dignity and respect for people and with people, not us deciding what people want or need. And I think, we're lucky, aren't we, that housing associations are generally quite financially strong organisations.
Yeah, typically.
And so we have got the opportunity to do things that help people just to live a decent life, or to live the life that you and me might choose to live for ourselves. And so I think that's really where it comes from. It's from...
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And I think as well, I really like the point you made. We did some stuff last year and we got caught up in, we were trying to do the right thing within homelessness in Manchester, and you get caught up in having to sometimes just take a step back and think, are we actually now adding value, or have we got caught up in the wrong things for the wrong reasons? And so always going back to that, why are we doing this? Because I'm not bothered about an ESG report. I'm bothered about how we're going to help people.
Yeah, exactly. And, so we'll do the usual things people do. So, I did the 3 Peaks last year or the year before with a few colleagues to raise money for local charity that supports children whose parents are going through cancer treatment. So we have a lot of energetic staff who do great fundraising things.
Love that. But
we'll commit some of we allow staff to do some volunteering each year in company time. So we kind of do bits of all sorts of things, really. So, because I think it's about what people are interested in doing with their time, and it's about what an individual tenant might need from us, really. So, yeah. I feel like we don't have a set of rules. It must be awful. No. You can tell I'm a bit of a rule breaker person.
Yeah, I was going to say, where's this come from?
What we've ended up with, I think, with lots of things, because people, when you talk about taking some of the processes away, people get anxious, don't they? So what we've got is what we call some frameworks for things. So the frameworks set out around, performance at work, or I don't know, some of the things that people would have what they call a policy on. We just have some guidance for people that says, these are some of the things that you should consider, that you should look at, but leave it flexible enough for people to, both for tenants and staff, do the right thing for the right.
Yeah, because if you don't have any framework, people think they're doing the right thing. Exactly. So it's amazing. The stories, mate. You must be super proud of what you've created in 5 or 6 years. I mean, already got to this point. The obvious next question is, what's next? Because you might have done too much in the last 6 years, but what would the next 5, 6 years look like? You said about another corporate plan or another plan that you're going to create, but what's next for you?
Yeah, and I am conscious that it must be a nightmare to work with me, because I am still so energetic and passionate about what we do. But I've got a brilliant exec team here who all feel the same. But we also really encourage, work-life balance. I don't want to give the impression that, of course, we really support. And we have total flexibility on hours and things now for people. So, fit your life around your job, work in a way that works for you. And so hopefully all of that helps to re-energize people and keep them on this great journey with us. So yes, we've achieved a lot. Is the job done? No, it's not. So we are just about to start year 5 of our current 5-year corporate plan, which means we have to have a new one approved by the board in about the autumn of this year. Mm-hmm. So where are we heading? So we started with a whole company-wide conversation. And I say, rather than do that via email or a big staff conference where only 20 people speak, we've been out to every single team over the last 9 months, and that's been me and one of the execs. So usually once a week, one of these is in the calendar. 1.5 hour conversation. You learn a lot. You hear a lot about what's affecting staff and also what they want for their residents. Yeah. So we've got a rich load of data around some of that now, and some of what's coming through is a continued need to focus on addressing food poverty, supporting our staff around that as well as our residents, and a really big priority around reducing the costs for people living in our homes. So energy efficiency, decarb. Yeah. So they're coming through as really big themes for our homes and our services. Huge need to keep building more. So we're on site with 500 homes, and everything we build to EPCA. And I do recognise, because sometimes when you put a podcast out there, it's a nicer place to work in Wales than it is in England, because we have a government who really believe in social housing and are funding it to good levels. So So that'll continue to be a big theme within our programme. But when I go around and look at all of our extra care facilities, I'm really proud of them. When I go into some of our homeless services, they're old and dated. So another big theme for us is going to be how we transform our sort of 20 homelessness services. And we know we get the best outcomes from the really small projects rather than the really big hostel type services.
Yeah.
So that's going to take a chunk of our time and our energy over the next few years. For our employees, we've got an ageing workforce. So a lot of people are maybe not quite as old as me, but a lot of people are, what people would call middle-aged. So we've got a really big drive now to bring a lot of younger people into the business, really want to bring the under 25s in. I would love to see, the next generation of leaders joining us who start to question us, challenge us. So we're launching a really big programme of trainees and apprentices and new roles. We've got 30 new roles approved in the budget this year, which at a time when lots of businesses are facing lots of financial pressures is going to create some really great opportunities. So a big focus in this next 5 years is going to be developing the leaders of the future for the business, bringing in fresh perspectives, fresh people, and really thinking about the change in, what I don't like the word needs, but what our residents are going to want from us over the next few years and what our employees are going to want from us over the next few years. COVID's changed a lot, hasn't it? And my youngest is 19, and what she wants from work is quite different from my son who's 34 and me.
Yeah,
so I think we've absolutely got to, and this is where the vacant post we've got, the exec director role, is going to be so valuable to us. I really want that person to come in and with some great ideas. They don't need to know housing, they just really need to believe in what we do, really believe in our poverty mission, love the trust, hope, kindness values, and want to really help us to really keep continuing to have a really exciting place to work that's got energy, that brings in fresh people, and that we adjust ourselves to become that place that attracts and keeps the best talent, really.
Well, it's important as well, isn't it? Because I was thinking about this before when you was talking. Like, I'm from Burnley, small town up in the north of England, and I lived in North Wales. And I think to myself, when you talk about trainees, I'm thinking you've got to find a way to keep people local to where they were brought up, because otherwise they go to the big cities and you've lost all that talent, that rich talent. And so it's important that we keep investing. And one of the reasons I do this podcast is I think it's a medium that younger generation of talent are listening to, and they use more frequently than I do.
You're spot on there, James. I keep talking to our younger staff about whether they'll do some TikToks for us for recruitment.
Exactly.
Because, my daughter, she's very visual in how she uses technology, and it's all about watching things, not reading text. So we've got to adapt ourselves, because if we don't, what'll happen is we'll be saying, how come we didn't get enough people applying for those jobs? And the bit you said about retaining the local talent, that is a huge drain in North Wales, that people go to Liverpool, Manchester, all the big cities for uni, and they don't come back. If they do, it might be when they're in their mid-30s and maybe got a family and want to settle back in the community where they grew up. And of course, we welcome those people into our workforce, but it would be fantastic to have the younger people who've been through their education or even school leavers, and to be able to get those people into our business from a really early age. And
we've got loads to offer now. You talked about sustainability. That's a big driver for the younger generation. You talk about digital transformation. We've got loads of career opportunities in housing, and people think of it and go, don't want to be a housing officer, because they think that's the only role available potentially sometimes, or the traditional roles that we know about. So it's a really good time for the sector, and I think it's nice to hear you're investing. What do you think? I suppose the last thing really from me is, like, what do you think is your most important piece of advice for someone that's going to transition from a different sector into our sector? Kind of, what are some of the key pieces of advice you would give someone that's going to move over to our sector?
It'll be the most exciting place you've ever worked, I would say. It's interesting. No, it's a really interesting question, because Elaine, who's our HR exec, who's leaving us, she hadn't worked in housing before she came to us. She'd worked in the third sector. She'd worked for the sort of Manchester Airport Group, so a lot of private sector experience as well. Right. So what I think I'd say to people is, you don't need to know everything about housing to work in this sector. What you do need is a really keen interest in people. You need to really believe in, if it was for ClwydAlyn you were applying, you need to believe in our mission around poverty. And I think you just need to have an open mind to, learning about how this sector works and functions. But I think if you've worked in the third sector, you've got loads of transferable skills anyway. And I think if you've worked in the private sector and you came into our business, we employed a solicitor. So we've got our own solicitor that works for us now, and he's worked in private practice. And what he says he loves is the environment and the culture is more relaxed. But he said that doesn't mean we don't get the work done. But he said, I'm not driven by accounting for every minute of every day. Yeah. You look at the bigger picture outcomes of the pieces of work you've asked me to achieve, not whether I've charged 8 hours of my day to somebody for the day before. So he came to us, say, wholly private sector experience, but he was sort of interested in what we did, didn't really know much. And I think the job roles are interesting. It's really varied. And it feels good to know that you're doing something really useful. And I'm not knocking that people in the private sector don't do useful things. Of course they do. But I think if you were looking for something fresh, an opportunity to work in something that you've not worked in before, it's interesting. Yes, there are challenges, but people coming into the vacancy that we've got will have dealt with loads of different types of challenges, won't they? And it's such a valuable thing that we do. The first thing we all need is somewhere safe to live in, and you can feel so proud of some of the great homes that we're providing for people, and then the way that we work with people. So I think it's got a lot to offer. And I wouldn't say the first thing we need is housing experience. The first thing we need is someone who believes in what we do, someone who's got the drive and energy to learn a bit more about it. And in an organisation like ClwydAlyn, because we're not huge, the people exec person has a huge contribution strategically. So they're at the table with everything we do, thinking about our growth strategy, thinking about our service strategy, thinking about our work with the board. The exec member is, everybody around that team contributes to the whole of what we do. We don't have people just working in their specialist area. So it's a chance to make a bigger, broader contribution in a business perhaps than you've been able to do before.
Yeah, amazing. I might apply myself at this rate.
Brilliant.
No, but Claire, I honestly really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us. I think anyone listening about ClwydAlyn, and I know that it's slightly different in Wales from what you've said from a development perspective, but that's not to say that all of those things that you've done to create such a wonderful culture in that business, you must be super proud. I'm sure your team are and your exec are super proud of what you've created as a business, because it really, really has transformed. And I'm really excited actually to see what the next 5 years looks like for the business. Yeah,
so am I. It's it's not about me, it's about everybody in the organisation. I think I'm just one little small cog. I guess I'm the person at the back saying, come on, and pushing, and fronting it all. But you really need a great team around you, don't you? You'll know that with your business. And to get this opportunity to, either to come and work for us as the exec or for me to do this job. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really good.
And your passion's infectious, and I know you're quite humble and you don't want to take the credit for it, but it does take a good leader for a business to thrive and to be in the right places and set the right vision for your staff. And I think you've done that remarkably, and I can't wait to see the future success of the business.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to catching up soon.
That was great. And I didn't know you from, I should have guessed from your accent from Burnley.
Everyone guesses.
I lived in Blackburn for 7 years. I liked it. I liked living in Lancashire. It was nice. Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, look after yourself. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.